Most people try to bend external reality. They try to force outcomes, push harder, hustle more, and all they get is resistance. Because the thing that bends first is not reality, it's the lens that you're seeing reality through. If you don't change the lens, the world stays the same, no matter how much effort you apply. So let's draw this out, okay? There are three components here that I want to cover in terms of what really bending reality is, okay? So number one is the external world. This is external events, situations, what's happening in the actual physical external world, okay? Number two, interpretation. How you're interpreting all the different events that are happening and experiences. And then number three, this is the identity layer. This is the identity in terms of how you see yourself, who you see yourself in this world to be. Because the mind bends reality before you even see it. Reality is filtered, and it's all filtered through your background, through your experiences, through your history, the narratives that you've had into your entire life, okay? And so just think about it this way. Two people can have the same exact experience, right? Let's say one person actually gets into a car accident with another, okay? So two people are in a car accident. One person is absolutely upset at the other person because they cause havoc and harm to their car, which is completely understandable. But the other person acknowledges that, but then also is grateful that they are alive and they understand, yes, it sucks, but it is what it is, and there's nothing more that you can really do about it, right? So same thing with just any given experience, opportunity, whatever it may be, or circumstance, okay? One person can look at that situation and be like, there's opportunity here. This is an opportunity for me to grow, for me to expand, for me to get to that next level. The other person can see the same exact event as negative, as, you know, talking down to them, or in the negative aspect in terms of fear, uncertainty, and can see it as like nothing ever good happens to me, right? So more of a victim mentality. Think about it from just those two different angles, right? There's a victim mentality and there's the empowering mentality. And so that's really what this is all about, is the lens that you are seeing life through, reality through. This is how you're bending reality, is deliberately choosing to see the world, right, your experience, from a positive, impactful lens, right? Where you see growth, you see opportunity, versus seeing challenge and negativity and victimization. And so there are three realities that people live in, okay? And let's break these down each individually. So the three realities are really how we're all experiencing reality itself, okay? So we got the outer layer here, we got this second layer, then we have the internal layer, okay? So the outer layer here, this is the perceived reality, okay? This is how you are seeing the world based off of your perceptions, your experience, right? What you see is capable in terms of you are being capable of accomplishing or doing X, Y, Z, or the limitation that you see, right? So all about perception. And this is really about your past history, your past experience, right? Have you grown up with limitations and perspectives from your family, from your friends, from your environment that are limiting, okay? So this is how you perceive reality. It's not objective, it's really subjective here, right? And it's all based off of your perception, okay? And then we have the second layer here, okay? This is the objective, okay? Objective perspective. This is where you are seeing things for what they are, okay? You're very neutral. There's no judgment. They're just like, it is what it is, okay? What can I do about it, right? And a small fraction of people can actually get to this level because it's so difficult, right? In terms of an experience happening that is not so great, right? I mentioned earlier about getting into a car accident. As long as you're still alive, at the end of the day, that is a win in of itself. And so you look at, you know, can you go back and change it? Can you alter reality and make it so that you never got to get into a car accident in the first place? No, you cannot. You have to be willing to accept things for what they are and acknowledge and understand that, hey, it is what it is, and look to be very level and kind of neutral towards it all, right? It's very difficult to get here because naturally, instinctually, right, we as humans are going to always react, right, to a certain situation. But keep in mind, when you're reacting, it's okay to react, but it's more important for you to acknowledge and to catch that reaction and be like, okay, I feel this. I'm angry right now. I understand it, right? And I have every right to be angry, but don't let that overtake you and actually become you, right? Because you're not an angry person, you're just angry at that particular moment. So being neutral, right, objective, is very difficult, very challenging. I get it. However, this is where the whole thinking of what can you actually do about the situation, right? Oftentimes it's the worry itself about a situation that causes the most pain, right? Like you think about if you lose a job, right? You're like, man, how am I going to be able to pay my bills? What are people going to think of me? My family's going to think I'm a loser. All these different things that are popping up in your head. But then on the positive side, it could be, man, I'm, set for a new opportunity here. Like I'm excited to look for a new opportunity. I think where I was very comfortable, and perhaps it did me a favor by letting me go, because now I can really expand my horizons and better myself and go after a new challenge, a new opportunity that I wouldn't have if I didn't get let go, right? I've had those opportunities myself as well when I was younger, and I always thought to look at things in the most positive perspective, objectively, right, as possible. Obviously, you have your feelings, you have your thoughts about the situation, but at the end of the day, is you really want to try to be as objective as possible here and just understand things are what they are, and there's really not much you can do about it, okay? And then we have number 3, okay? This is the designed, okay? And this is where you are deliberately creating your reality based off of the ideas, perspectives, and the uplifting and powerful, right, ways that you are deciding to see life. And keep this in mind, right? Obviously, you can design your reality to be a negative one, right? And most people are, unfortunately, doing things, designing their life unconsciously to be a negative one, right? But we want to be in control, right? We want to be deliberately creating our reality, and we want to be designing it. This is where you become the programmer and not the user, right? You are designing how this program should be run, the different tasks, different executions that this software is to be doing, right? You are deliberately creating that as the programmer. Okay, so now let's look at the loop that creates reality. So this is a loop here that is constantly creating our reality, whether we realize it or not. Okay? First, you have to understand everything is driven by identity, okay? And then you have your interpretation, okay? Then you have your emotion. Then you have your behavior, which then creates your reality, okay? And then it goes back to your identity, which then is essentially given the world, right, your specific selective identity, okay? Whether you realize it or not. So your identity is really about who you've decided that you are to the world, okay? And you're choosing that based off of how you're seeing the world, your actions, okay? And then you are interpreting the data, the circumstances, the situations, and then you are attaching emotion to that, right? There's emotion that you are experiencing, whether it be happiness, sadness, any type of anger, or whatever it may be that you are experiencing here, and then you are attaching a meaning here, okay, to this emotion, and then you are choosing to take an action through your behavior, right? And then that's reinforcing your identity, okay? So it's a big loop here, okay? Massive loop of how reality really is created, okay? And so you're not bending reality outward, you're bending the loop that generates it, okay? So this, you are needing to decide then what a new reality looks like for you based off of your identity, okay? And with everything that I talk about, keep in mind that at the core of it all is identity, right? Because you can do different things to try to become better in terms of procrastination, productivity, right? All these different techniques or hacks, but if your identity isn't where you have chosen deliberately to be a certain person, you're going to get the same outcomes every single time because the identity is still running old programming, okay? And so once you understand this here, then you're going to be able to understand what are the patterns, what are the circumstances, the situations that are happening through this entire loop every time something happens to me, right? And you can become consciously aware so that you can reprogram this so that you have positive outcomes, positive experiences, and you're seeing life from a positive lens. Because that's how you really are bending reality, is changing that lens that you're seeing your life through. Okay, so now let's talk about the 4 mechanisms that allow you to bend reality. Let's go over each one of these individually. Okay, so these are 4 pillars. Okay, and we're going to go over each one of these individually. So number 1, okay, I'm going to draw all of these here and then we'll discuss them individually here. Okay, so number 1 is the identity, recalibration. And this is an understanding that reality really bends to who you believe you are, okay? So if you change the role that you're playing, then the script changes, right? Think about this in the sense of a movie, right? Think about all these different actors that are getting paid millions upon millions of dollars, and all they need to do is act, play a certain role, right? You think about all these famous actors that are just, regular people, just like you and I, and they spend months and months and months creating this movie and really getting deep into this character, this identity that isn't really them, and they're just playing this role, but it's really about the embodiment of this identity and all of this that goes into playing a role, right, that you're not normally playing. So it's really about deciding here, how do you want to show up? Who are you, right? You think about the term and the words of I am blank. Who are you, right? Asking that question. How do you want to be seen, right? How do you view yourself, right? Because your internal is going to directly reflect your external. If you see yourself as somebody who is powerful, who is impactful, who is warm, empathetic, who is respectful and respected, right, by others, by his peers, then guess what? That's going to manifest itself in the external world. But if you also see yourself as somebody who's limited, who's a loser, who doesn't get things done, who's a victim, then guess what? Reality is going to manifest that directly into the external world, right? Because everything in terms of your reality all starts inside, internal. And then it's like a reflection, a mirror, okay, that goes from your inside to the external. Think of the identity as setting the rules of your experience, of your reality. And then pillar number 2 is perception engineering. Here's the thing. I don't know if you've ever heard the term perception is reality. And there's a lot of truth behind that, because reality is not events in the external world that are happening. Reality is really the interpretation of those events. That is what really reality comes down to, is events happening, situations, circumstances, right? Inputs that are coming into your environment and internally, externally, and then you interpreting those in a positive or negative manner and attaching meaning to those in terms of what that means to us, because this is all a meaning-making situation and circumstance, right? Think about existence. For us as humans, we're constantly attaching meaning to things that are happening in our life. And once we understand that at the core, it's all about attaching meaning and meaning making, we get to decide what our life is about because we have attached a positive meaning, right? Think about people that are like, the poor people that are in, and I don't want to say really poor, but more of like the people that are like, don't have a whole lot of money, that are living in like third world countries, or, that are living in like the forest, and they don't really have a whole lot, but they have their family, they have just enough to eat, maybe they have farmland, and they are living off the actual farmland itself. You think about the people in the Amish, right? Those people don't really go out into the external world in terms of going to the store, the grocery store, or, interacting with other people. They live off the farm and the land, and they really have a very high satisfaction of life, right? Because They've attached the meaning of happiness and contentment to their experience, right? So they have deliberately decided that. And so when you change the interpretation and you change the emotional world, that changes your behavior, and then that changes the outcome. And then pillar number 3, behavioral alignment. This is your identity in action, okay? In terms of you see yourself a certain way, you are interpreting and seeing life and reality as opportunities for growth, for expansion, right? For becoming better, and you're having a positive outlook. And then you are using all of that information and data for your behavior to reinforce your identity, right? To reinforce in terms of how you're thinking, how you're seeing the world, and then also taking micro actions to solidify and reinforce your identity, right? In terms of, are you getting up early, the time that you designated? Are you taking in information and content that is uplifting, that is positive, that is going to help you become a better person? Or are you listening to the media, the news that are going to be taking you down a negative path and a negative perspective, right? So we want to reinforce our identity and our perceptions through behavior, right? This is the actual manifestation of it in the external world. And then we have the environmental manipulation, okay? So this is where we are around people that are uplifting, that are going to be benefiting us, that are going to be also helping us and getting us to that next level, but also your workspace. Where do you live? Are you in a city that is empowering, that is beneficial? I mean, one of the biggest things for me, growing up in Washington State, in the Seattle area, was to completely get out of that city and that entire area. I moved to Miami, Florida about, almost 5.5 years ago now. And it completely changed my entire life because I got around people who thought differently, who saw the world differently, who saw, opportunity, growth, all of that. And, really the weather as well. And then the just climate and just overall energy of the city really helped me level up, right? And then the people that I talked to and all of that, you see wealth all over the place here, and you really start to realize, man, there's so much that is possible, right? There's no limitations here. So your environment plays a big factor, and probably one of the biggest factors in terms of getting around the right people, consuming the right content, and making it so that you are in a place that allows you to easily change your reality, right? Because physically, if you change your reality in terms of where you're living at and who you're around, that in and of itself will have a significant impact in your life. And then if you're implementing all these other ones here in terms of identity, your perception, your behavior, then it just creates a huge momentum, and then you're on the fast track to success. And here's the ultimate reality bending truth. Your reality responds to your identity. So let's break this down, okay? In terms of how the reality is bending, okay, to who you are. This is the most critical and crucial truth here, okay? So reality is not what happens, okay? Reality equals who you're identified with. So how do you see yourself? How do you identify? Do you identify as someone who can make things happen? Who is resourceful? Understands that challenges are going to come no matter what, but there's always opportunities, and there's always a way to figure things out. There's always a way to make things happen or to get around something? Or do you see yourself as someone who unfortunately sees themselves as a victim, and at any given challenge or roadblock that comes, do you stop? Do you just stop dead in your tracks and you give up? Or do you see yourself as someone who's always sees an opportunity in whatever happens, or a learning experience, right? How do you identify yourself with? Because once you start to identify yourself as resourceful, as a creator, as a deliberate designer of your reality, then guess what? That's going to start manifesting yourself because you are identifying yourself as that, right? You think about the people, and I'm not political on this, in terms of the people who are identifying themselves as men who are women, and in women identifying themselves as men who are women, right? So for me, I believe people can do whatever they want to do and can, identify as whoever they like as long as they're not affecting other people, right? But just think about the conviction behind that in terms of somebody is truly a biological male, but they identify as a woman, right? There's got to be some level of just massive conviction there and a little bit of delusion too, right? A little bit of delusion isn't a bad thing. It's just keeping it where you understand that a little part of it is okay and natural, but it's the conviction behind it, right? So it's about how you identify yourself as that's really going to play a factor here in terms of the ultimate truth bomb, right? You need to identify yourself as someone who sees the positives, who is seen as a creator, as somebody who always finds ways to figure things out, right? Resourceful, all of that. Okay, so now let's cover the 3 identity shifts that bend reality, okay? These 3 identity shifts are super powerful, okay? And we're gonna go through each one of these individually. Shift 1, okay? This is the observer. This is where you're just observing the situation, circumstances, data, inputs that are coming into your reality, to your experience, and you're disassociating yourself from them. They are not you, right? You're not a failure. Maybe you have failed, but you've really gathered data, on a particular subject or task or whatever it may be, right? You're just observing the things the way they are, but you're not essentially attaching any meaning. You're like, okay, this is happening, that's happening. Okay, interesting. No judgment, just observing, okay? And the shift here is really because you're starting as the victim, okay? And you are just turning into a just simple, plain observer, okay? So you're first starting out as a victim, and then you're just observing things naturally and being very neutral, okay? And the second one, okay, shift number 2, is from observer to designer. So you first are starting as the victim, then you're just naturally observing the data, the information, the inputs, and then you're going from the observer to the actual designer, okay, of your reality. You begin to architect your world based off of how you want it to be and how you want it to look. But there's still a lot that goes into this phase here, because in this shift, you still have a lot of willpower that needs to be utilized, right? Maybe you're outlining your life and you're very productive and you're getting things done, but there still requires a lot of fuel for you to make this happen. And so the shift number 3 is from designer, okay, to embodied identity, okay? This is where you're embodying the identity as a whole, and you're no longer needing to use a whole lot of willpower, really willpower at all, because everything is just natural. There's alignment there, and you're acting from that version of you, right? That identity script, that role player, right? That player that you have decided to be. And so there's really no friction to what you're doing, right? Like, you enjoy what you're doing, and there's no tension, there's no friction. And think of it as like a magnet where you're just naturally walking around and just you're attracting things that are naturally gravitating towards you because you are in alignment with who you are, and that's vibrating and showcasing out into the external world. So now let's go over the reality bending process. This is a 4-step process, okay? And this is what's going to allow you to really bend reality and do it consciously and do it in such a way that you're going to be able to get the outcomes that you're desiring, okay? Those outcomes that you're wanting to make happen and to achieve, but you haven't been able to because you haven't really understood the whole system, the game, and how it all works, okay? But now you're going to. So number 1 is the awareness, okay? You have to be aware of how this is all playing out, of what's going on, how the system runs, how reality works, okay? How you're talking to yourself, becoming aware of all these different things, right? Especially how you're talking to yourself in situations that don't go as planned, right? Do you see yourself and talk to yourself like you are a failure? Like, man, I really suck, or I'm an idiot. All these different, terms that you're using, you never want to use that language about yourself, right? Think about it. A lot of people really talk down to themselves, and more so than actually other people, because your mind has these scripts running, right? And every time something doesn't go as planned, you're like, man, I'm an idiot, or can't believe I did that, or gosh, what a doofus, or whatever. All these different things that are going on in your mind, and you're talking down to yourself. You do not want to do that. Words are very powerful. You always want to be disassociating yourself from the action, the activity. You're not stupid. You maybe did something that was stupid, right? So think about that, right? We really want to be aware of what's going on and understanding how is the system operating, okay? And then it's about the interpretation. Number 2. This is where we are attaching the meaning, right? And this is where we need to attach meaning that is serving us, that is positive, that is impactful, that is progressive, that is allowing us to see opportunity where others are seeing challenges, or where they're seeing negative situations, right? Because if you're seeing things from a negative aspect, guess what? You're going to get a negative outcome. It's always going to be the same, right? It's about how you are seeing one thing. That's how it's going to reflect back to you, right? It's a mirror, it's a reflection. And then number 3 is the identity. This is where you are taking small actions from your future self, your identity, right? That you are seeing yourself as, that are reinforcing how you are now seeing yourself, right? Because you have become aware of what's going on in your life, all the different negative inputs or information that's happening, right? You're aware of what's going on, then you're interpreting it in a positive manner now, and then you are affecting your identity in terms of now you're able to take small just actions as a whole that are reinforcing that. And then it's about environment transformation, okay? So your environment in terms of who you're hanging around with, how your space is it clean? Is it cluttered? Is it all over the place? Who are you interacting with in terms of on a daily basis? You have people that are at your level or higher, or you got regular people that are just trying to get you to not get up too high, because then there's going to ask questions about themselves, and then they're going to feel a certain way. So really think about all of these different components that are playing together in the environment. This really locks the reality bending loop into place, because it's about who you're hanging around with, how your environment is, and when you're able to change that, then that has a significant impact in your ability to really bend reality to how you want it to be. And so here's the thing. You don't bend reality by force. You bend it by becoming somebody who reality organizes itself around. Reality doesn't respond to effort. It responds to identity. When you change the architecture of your mind, the architecture of your world changes with it.